Welcome to Django. Django is a high-level Python-based web framework that's heavily used by large tech companies like Instagram or Spotify, and today you will be learning the basics. Django comes batteries included, which means a lot of features are already built in to make development fast and easy. Today we'll be going over the setup of Django, views and URLs, using models, and learning to use Django's admin panel and database. So with that, let's get started. Now for this video, I'll assume that you have worked with Python before because you'll be needing the syntax, and I'll also assume that you have pip and Python installed on your computer, as well as maybe virtual environment, but you can set those up in your own time. They are very simple to set up. And I have a separate folder opened over here, and I'll open a new terminal. This will be our Django setup. First of all, what I'll be doing is saying Python -m venv as of virtual environment and set up a virtual environment called environment. This is needed because when we are installing packages with Python, if we install packages globally, it may break some other projects of ours. So instead, we'll be installing into this virtual environment. Once that's finished, you can run your virtual environment by going into the ./env folder, search for the scripts and deactivate. Run this and you will be in your virtual environment. Now in here, what we'll be doing is installing Django. The way you install Django is by saying pip install Django. Once you are done with the installation of Django, what you can say to create your first Django project is django-admin, then start project, and give your project a name. I will be calling mine my shop, as we are building something of a shop or e-commerce based tutorial. If you run this command, you'll be able to see that a folder got created in my shop, and we can cd into that my shop folder, cd and then the my shop. Now we can test out whether we've successfully created our Django project or not by saying python manage.py run server. The manage.py is one which is representative of your app. It contains your settings, and you will always be referring to it whenever you're doing something Django specific. If you've given out that command, you can open up localhost 8000 because that's the default where Django will run unless you've overwritten it in the past, and you'll be able to see that you've successfully installed Django. This is a basic boilerplate they give you. Now I stop the development server by pressing Ctrl+C. I clear the console. And before we get into the folder structure and how everything is set up, in Django there are apps. You have your main project, and inside that the apps are like little features to your basic web application. For example, if I want to have a payment section, then I can create an app called payment, but if I simply want the shop logic and how everything is structured, I can create a shop app as well. And we'll be doing that. Python manage.py, because remember, when you're doing something Django specific, you'll always be referring to this one, and then start app. This is different from the start project or the create project. And then you can give your app a name. I will be giving mine the shop. If you run the command, it finishes, and in the folder structure you will be able to see that below my shop, which is your main root folder, you will have a shop folder available. Now we'll get into what everything means in the folder structure. Let's start from the outside. There is your manage.py. I will hide this window for now. It contains a bunch of settings for your current operating system. You won't need to touch this. This will automatically do its thing. Unless you really know what you're doing, just leave this one. Don't do anything about it. Now Django has a db.sqlite file. Since Django uses SQLite by default, and if you're familiar about databases, there are SQL and NoSQL databases. Django is an SQL database, meaning it uses tables which will be represented in forms of models, as you'll see later on. And these tables can be connected to each other, and they contain different type of data. For example, one we'll be creating is called a product table, but there will also be a categories table or a text table, and they will all contain different type of information, but they will be connected to each other so that they can communicate. There are also Postgres or MySQL that you can have a look at, but SQLite is very lightweight, it's very easy to use, and that's the built-in that Django uses. Now there is the MyShop folder inside the MyShop folder. This contains your root. If you have different apps, you'll always be needing to link your apps over here. And if you open it up, you'll be able to see a bunch of stuff. There is the PyCache folder, which contains a lot of data that's cached in the meanwhile. We won't be touching this. There is an init.py, which will also get auto-populated later on. And then the SG file is not something you'll have to worry about either. And neither is the VSG file. You will be needing this if you want to deploy your app on render, for example, but that's a different topic. The main two things in the root folder that you'll be concerned about is the URLs and the settings.py. In your settings.py, there are a bunch of options you have, and depending on what you're doing, you'll be needing always to change this. Not all of it, just extend it a little bit, like we will be doing right now since we are already over here. In here you have an installed apps, which is very important because we created a different app called shop over here. And by default, Django won't recognize it. It won't take up that this app is actually working, it's populating data and whatnot. So instead, we have to register it. The way you register it is there is a comma over here and you put an extra field. The extra field will be the name of your app. In case it's going to be shop because we called it shop. Other things you will be needing in here, but we won't be covering it this time, is that you have a secret key for Django. Don't share this, otherwise your app may get security issues. There is also debug set to true. If you set debug to true, which should be set to false in production mode, you'll be able to see more detailed error messages on the console. That's why it's called debug mode, because it makes it easier for you to debug. There is allowed hosts, meaning what URLs are allowed to visit your site. You will also be having some other policy settings, but these are more advanced and we are covering the basics right now. Now moving on to the URLs. The URLs in your root folder is going to be important because, as I said, everything needs to connect to this folder. There is already a URL set up for the admin slash. The reason this URLs folder is important is because in Django you have URLs and views. A view, you can look at it as a to which you can make calls and it will execute functionality on that path. And in the URLs is where you actually specify where to reach them. As you see, if I was to go into our app and go to the admin tab panel, it would present us the admin panel. But let's actually try that. Bring up your terminal and run your development server. Once that's done, instead of coming to localhost 8000, you should come to localhost 8000/admin. And we run into an error. Our admin panel is not yet set up. We haven't created a super user, we haven't done anything with it, so it won't really show. But what's important in here is that you take note of this whole error. This is how errors look like if your debug is set to be true. It's much easier to debug and it's much more user-friendly. So I'll just close this up now and we'll move on with the folder structure. We'll be revisiting the URLs and views after we are done with the folder structure. If you move on to our separately created app, you'll be able to see that there is a PyCache over here as well. There is something called the migrations. Migrations will be important for our database. Migrations are like versions of your database. There is the first migration, an initial migration, and then if you add different type of tables and data to your database, you'll be able to have more migrations, more versions of it. The init.py will get populated, and then there is the admin.py. Here you'll be able to register different type of modules to your admin panel so that you'll be able to work with those data in your admin panel. There is the apps.py, where basically there is information about your app. Here is the name of your app, your default name. There is the modules, which represent your tables in Django. Here we'll be creating our data like product. The tests is not something we'll be touching this time. It's more advanced. It's for writing tests in Django. And then there is also a views.py, which you didn't find in the main folder over here, the views will define the functionality of your URLs. So with this little tour over the folder structure, let's get to creating our first views and URLs. So to create our first view in your shop folder, go to the views.py. As I said, views stand for the functionality, the logic behind your URLs. We'll only be visiting function-based views in here because I'm presenting to you Django from an API standpoint of view, and there will be Django REST framework which I'll be creating a video on if you want to really get advanced. Other than that, we'll be covering function-based views. The reason it's function-based is because you create a function and you give it a name, like we'll be giving it homepage. Then this function is going to return something, return a response. And that response will get executed, and whatever data you return will present in some form in Django. One thing to note in here is that every function-based view will receive a request. This request will be accessible like request.method, request.context, other type of data, and you'll be able to get whatever the request usually contains. I've made a video on this earlier. But what's important for us is that we return something. And what I'd like to return is an HTTP response. Delete this render statement from here because it's very Django specific. And from Django.http, we'll import an HTTP response. You can see that there are a bunch of responses over here. You can throw errors, bad request, forbidden, 404, whatever you want, but it's going to be an HTTP response this time. You call this HTTP response, put parentheses, and then put in some text you'd like to render. For me, it's going to be this H1, welcome to my shop. Okay, we've created our logic. Now how do we hook it up? As I said in the URLs. But wait, is it this URLs that we are going to be using? Well, actually not. Inside your shop folder, create a new file called urls.py. In that, we have a few imports to make. From Django.urls, we'll import a path. This path will help us, this function will help us define the path, the URL path that we'll be using. And from dot, because if you say dot, you're importing from the local folder, we'll import our views so that we are able to access the logic that we've written there. Then there is something that you will be needing to type out. It's URL patterns. And this is an array of URL patterns. Inside that, we use the function that we've imported, which is the path function. The first thing that this will receive is a path, a route. I want this to be the default. If you visit only localhost 8000, you'll be able to see that H1 that we've rendered over there. That's what this path is implying. And then put a comma and call the views that we've imported over here, dot, and you'll be able to access the home page as a function. This is the same name that I've created over here. Where is it? In the views. This is called homepage. If I was to call it something else, the views would update and we would be able to access it. You don't have to call this function. All you have to do is imply it like this. Additionally, you can name your views. This is also more Django specific, but sometimes you'll be needing it, so I'll be showing this to you. You can give it a name and you can later refer to it as, for example, home page. It's good practice to give each of your route a different name. If you save this now and viewer to visit our app, you still wouldn't be able to see anything. You will see our boilerplate. Now the requirement to hook this up is first of all to register your app in the settings, which we already did. I already showed you, it's a very important part, don't miss it. And the other is to come to your URLs in your main root folder, the My Shop. As you see, there is a path given for the admin. We'll give another path since it's already included. This path is going to be the home path. So I leave it simply empty because you don't need to put a slash at the admin either. And there is another function that will help us do our thing. And next to the path, you can easily import it by just putting a comma. It will be the include function. This include will be needed, so we include the whole URLs from our sub app, our basic app. Now you don't need to import anything else apart from these. I zoom in a little more if it's more visible. I'll just simply say include over here and then hard code the shop, which is the name of my app, .urls. This way we will be able to access our URLs. Now since we have the development server running, I should be able to look at this. If you visit localhost 8000, you'll be able to see welcome to my shop. Now this is great. We've actually created our first view and our first URL. Next we'll be able to move on to models because they are also a very important part of Django, and then connect it to views, which will then connect to URLs and display some other type of data. Now let's close this up and move on in our shop folder to the models.py. We'll be creating our first set of data here in form of a product. The way you create models in Django is by creating a class. You give your model a name. This time I will call it a product. You put parentheses and then there is a models already imported from the Django database. The reason this is important is because each model is going to inherit at least from the models.model, which is basically the schema of how models are set up. In Django REST framework, there will be a different type of model you will be inheriting from, but since we are looking at the basics, this is how you do it. And then you can move on and put different type of fields to your class. One I will be interested in is, for example, a name. The way you insert fields is by calling the models that's auto-imported up above and then putting a dot. Then you'll be able to access a bunch of fields like car field, integer field, date field, even image field, which we won't really be covering this time. You can have a look at it in the documentation and I will be covering it later. But for the models, call the car field. Now this gives us a bunch of template over here, but what's interesting about the car field is that you don't have to give too much. All you have to give is a max length. The max length I will set, for example, to be 100 characters. Before we do anything else and we move on to creating our database, I will also call a description over here where I will say models and models.text field. The text field is different. I won't be giving it anything here. You can also give a max length, but I don't want to. And what's important is that the text field is usually larger, like a text area in HTML and like an input field in HTML. These are the two differences. Now save this and we'll migrate our database. What do I mean by migration? Well, pull up your development server and stop it. I put a clear on the console, and whenever you change your models, you change the data, you need to create migrations so that Django recognizes those changes. These migrations will be to your database, your db.sqlite file. The way you do it is by saying Python manage.py and make migrations. It's plural, so make sure to include it. I will zoom out a little so it's maybe better visible. And then you run this. You'll be able to see that create model product is logged over there. That means our product is now given to the database. And then a pair of this, which is also a requirement, is the python.manage.py and migrate, because we made our migrations, but we haven't applied it. This way we are applying them. Now with this done, I will clear the console and we should be able to visit our admin panel. So python manage.py run server. Put in /admin after localhost 8000 and you'll be able to see this little login form. Now obviously we won't be able to log in. And you can also switch from dark and light theme. That's just something I noticed right now. We won't be able to log in because we haven't created our super user yet. So I have to stop our development server, clear the console, and give out a command, python manage.py create super user. And if you run this command, you'll be prompted to give your super user a name. For me, it's going to be Levi. That's fine with me. You give a random email address like test@gmail.com. It doesn't need to be a real email address. It's not something that's being tested. And then you give a random password. I give a simple dummy password. I give the dummy password yet again. And then it will say that mine is too common. Yes, I know that it is too common. I did it on purpose. And then we'll be able to move on. Our super user was created successfully. Now, if you run the development server once again, visit our Django admin, you put in your username, and then you put in your password, you'll be able to log in. And now you are able to see there are groups in Django. These are for the users, and there are also the users where I am able to see myself. I'll zoom in a little more. And I can click on myself, I can reset my own password, I can put in staff status, super user active, all the other stuff that's required over here. Usually you don't want to touch the users unless you are a little more advanced. As we said, we migrated and the product should be visible here, right? I mean, it's part of the database. Why is it not visible? That's because migrations standalone are not enough. We need to register those in the admin.py. So I hide, or at least I stop the development server for now and clear the console, then hide the console and come to the admin.py in our folder structure. In our admin.py, all you have to do is that there is this admin already imported, and the way you register something to be visible and manipulatable from the database is the admin.site.register. But what do you want to register? For that we need to import our models. So from .models, because it's inside our basic folder, import, and then you'll be able to import your product. Now all you have to do is pass in this product here to the register function, and this will automatically register the product for you. Now if you run your development server once again and visit the admin panel login, you'll be able to see that there is a products field over here. You can click on add product on the top right hand side or simply click on add, and you'll be prompted to see your actual fields that we've implemented. As you see, we've implemented a name and we've implemented a description. You can play around with these and then click save, but then you would run into some problems when we add multiple models or more fields. Most of you probably did, so I play around with it now and create something to show you how to handle those errors that you'll be encountering. Like give it an X and my beautiful X. I will save this and you'll be able to reach it later on. For now, I'll just stop the development server and we'll move back to our models. The reason I want to come back to our models is because there are a bunch of other type of fields that I want to show you in Django. For example, let the product have a price. The price will be a models.decimal field. In the decimal field, you'll be able to give something a max digits, which I will be setting to 10, for example, and the decimal places to be 2. There is another type of simple field, for example, the stock, as of how many items do we have on stock right now. It will be a models.integer field. Integer field. By the way, I'm not covering all of the options here because there are a bunch of options, but I want to cover the most basic ones and the ones you'll probably be needing the most. If you want to know more about this, then you have to go into documentation and read all you want for hours, but let's move on. And another one that I will be creating for now, when we'll be coming back to this model later, is the created at, which will be a models.date field. And the models.date field, I want it to be auto-populated. So I set the auto add now, and this will be set to true. By the way, you will also be able to create, for example, yes to be a models.boolean field, models.whatever other field you want to have in here. So I really encourage you to play around with this. There is also an email field, and the email field is important because it validates that it's actually an email that got sent. Now what we'll be doing instead is calling Python manage.py and make migrations. Because we've added new data to our product, so I want to make new migrations. And there you go. We've already encountered this error. The reason I said not to play around with your models is because if you give new data to your models, which your previously existent ones don't have, then you run into an error that Django doesn't know what to do with those previously existent data. Does it give a one of default to them, or do you resolve it manually? And for now, I just resolve it manually. The way we are going to resolve it is going to be a very caveman method. We are going to delete our whole database. Come in here and delete your db.sqlite first of all. Then come over here and open up your migrations. Inside that, select the initial py, not the init.py, but the 001, our first migration. And then also the 001 in the PyCache folder. If we delete this, we should be good to go. Now make sure not to mess around with this too much because then you'll break your app. But we can repopulate these fields easily by creating our migrations once again. Here you go, our product got migrated, and I can migrate these to apply the changes, and there would be no problem at all. No, of course our data got deleted, but if we run the development server first of all and then visit our admin panel, you will also see that our super user got deleted this way. So we'll have to recreate the super user. This is a little bothersome, that's why it's very important to have a thought out model of your actual tables in your database. And this way I created our super user and I will run this server once again. Once I've logged in, you'll be able to see that I can add the new products and no existent products are here. I will add a few, but we'll be deleting it later. But make sure you also add those, because now we'll be listing these data out in our view and hooking it up with our actual application. I've given some data, I'll click save and add another one. Now you'll be able to see our data appeared over here, and you can always delete it or edit it if you want to. But let's hide this terminal for now and move on to our views. The reason I want to move on to our views is because there will be two other views we'll be creating. One is going to be for listing out the products. I will call it product list. The product list will receive a request, and then we have to get the data from the database. The way you get all of the data from the database is, first of all, you have to import your models. From .models import your product. Once that's done, you'll be able to access the product.objects.either_all. This will get you all the data. You can also filter, where you give something to be equal to something and you get back multiple of those type of data, or you can use the get and it will only give you back one type of data. These are the most basic ones you can use on the objects, but as you see, there are a bunch of other types. What we'll be doing is storing all of the data. So the products_data will be equal to the product.objects.all. This will give us back all the data that we have available in the database, but we won't be able to present this. The reason we won't be able to present this is because the browser will only be able to show it in a JSON format. So instead we'll be needing to convert this into something as a JSON. I will store it in the products_JSON variable, and it will be using a different type of option. The function we'll be using is going to be the list function. You put list and then put parentheses, and this will turn your Django based model data into JSON data. So what you do is call the products data dot values, and inside that specify which fields you want to show. One thing that I didn't talk about before is that you actually have a built-in ID field in Django, and Django takes care of that. That is your primary key for each object, and it's auto-populated from 1 going to infinity. So for example, I want to show the ID, I want to show the name, I want to show the description, make sure not to typo these, I want to show the price, let's say I want to show the stock, and it doesn't matter if you use double quotes here or simple quotes. And I also want to show the created at. Did we have any other? I don't believe so. And then we have to return this like we did with an HTTP response. So I return, but not an HTTP response this time. Instead, next to the HTTP response, I will put a comma and import a JSON response, and call the JSON response down there in the return statement and pass in the products JSON. This won't show us it yet. If you were to try this out, and I encourage you to do so, it will say that it's only available if you put save to false. So I have to put save to be false, because this is more like a security measure that save is set to true. If you set it to false, you will be able to present JSON type data in your browser. No, and we are back at square one because we have to hook this up in our URLs. So come to the URLs in your shop first of all, and then we'll be hooking it up later in the my shop. Put a comma over here and call the path. At which path do I want to access this type of data? I want to access it at products and then put a slash at the end. What type of logic do I want to execute when someone visits this? Well, that's going to be the views.productlist. And as I said, it's good practice to give everyone a name, so it will be the product-list. The question is, do we need to do anything in our root folder with the URLs? The short answer is no, because we've already included all the URLs from this shop. So we won't be needing to change anything over here. We can close this up and we are basically done with this URL for the sake of the tutorial. Now, since our development server is running, I will be able to visit localhost 8000 and it will show us the welcome to my shop, and I will be able to visit the products and it will show us data in JSON format. If I click on pretty print at the top left corner, it will make sure that our data is laid out in a nicer format. And you'll be able to see that the auto-generated ID is 1 for the first item, and for the chair of the CEO, it's 2. Great, we've actually listed our data. Next, we'll be making sure that we'll be able to access the products by their ID. For example, if I say products/1, I will be able to see the bed, but if I say products/2, I will be able to see the product with the ID of 2. This is using foreign keys and it's more like slugs, but not quite. We'll be covering slugs as well. So to work on the given functionality, let's move back to our views, hide the terminal for now, and let's create another function. I will call this simply product, as we'll be getting the information of only one product. It will get the request and it will receive another parameter this time, which is going to be p key as of primary key. Here, what I'll be using is storing the product as the product information in Django format with the get object or 404. But this is not recognized yet because we have to import this. So from Django.shortcuts, we have to import the get object or 404. There is also get list or 404 if you want to use that, but that's not an individual piece of data. So I say get object or 404, meaning if we fail to get this certain data, it will throw us back an HTTP 404 response. And here you pass in which type of model you want to get from. And as a second argument, you get by which argument, which is going to be the primary key. Now, unfortunately, there is no proper way of handling this into a JSON format or to a dictionary, because the JSON response can convert your Python dictionaries into JSON. So we have to create a product JSON by hand, by ourselves. For that, I will be creating it like this. There is the curly braces, and then you, just like you would in a JSON, pass in the fields. The ID will be the product.id. It's that simple. The name, that will be the product.name. And then you go over all the things that you'd like to import in here. I copy paste this over, and one thing to note is that I put a float over here so that the product.price is actually represented in a float. With this, we have our product JSON, and we should be able to return the JSON response. And in the JSON response, of course, put in the product JSON. If you save this, you go into our URLs and put in another path, just the usual. But this time it's going to be products / and how do you define that it should be a dynamic URL? The way you define that it should be a dynamic URL is by using angled brackets. It will receive an integer type and it will be the primary key that it will receive. This is the dynamic way of saying that you can access elements with the primary key. And then you can simply go on to views and access the product that we've created. And make sure to give it a name as well, like simply product. With this, if we go back to our development server, if I go to products/1, then I get an error saying that cannot unpack non-iterable int object. So we have to resolve this. And there we have the problem. The problem was that I inserted the primary key here as to search by that, but you actually need to put a condition into the get object or 404. So instead of saying simply primary key, we define that the primary key should be the same primary key that gets passed in over here, that gets passed in from the view. So with this little fix over here, take note of this. If we go back and refresh, I get now a different type of the error. And that's because, yet again, we need to put the / over here to end it. Otherwise you will get your error. But now, with this error resolved, we should be able to get this, and I can pretty print it. It's important that you see these errors and you know how to resolve them, so just make sure to pay attention to your typos. So now that we've covered the dynamic URLs by a number, we'll be covering slugs and UUIDs as well. I think it's time to create some more models and link those together. So come to your models.py. Something that I like to do is have a product detail. The URL would go like this: products/the ID/the detail. But for that, we have to make some different type of data, like the product detail will inherit from the models.model. Just as we did before, every model is going to inherit from the models.model. And then let's say I want to link this. Then the way you link it is by saying, for example, product, and this will be a models.one-to-one field. What does one-to-one field represent? Well, as you see, each detail can only be bound to one product. On the contrary, each product can only be bound to one detail. So this is a one-to-one relationship where only one is linked to another one. Here you pass in the model that you want to link it to, and of course it's the product model. Then there is something that's always given, and this is basically the benchmark, which is the onDelete, the models.cascade. What does model.cascade do? The onDelete method with the models.cascade represents that if you have the data, for example, the detail, and that certain detail gets deleted, then all the other type of instances who reference that certain detail will also get deleted together with that. A simple example is like deleting a post from one of your social media platforms and all the comments also go down with it. That's the models.cascade. You could also put models.restrict or protect, and protect basically says that you won't be able to delete this unless you delete all the other ones that are linked to it previously. So most people usually go with cascade. We'll go with that as well. And then you can give a related name over here. The related name is similar to the name of the URLs, and I will call it detail. If you are writing code, you will be able to refer to this certain name and reach the certain type of data. As for the next type of data, I will be giving a manufacturer. This is just some basic data. It's going to be a car field and it's going to have a max length of 100. Now I will also put a warranty period. A warranty period, because I have something that I want to show you, is a help text. This will appear in your models, like warranty period in months, so that you know in the admin panel, if you want to add there, that it's represented in months. I will also give additional info, and then additional info is going to be a text field. There are two other properties I haven't shown you, which is the blank, which can be set to true, meaning it will be able to accept blank data. This is good if you are adding data to your database later on, because then you can say that provide one of default, or they will also just be provided a simple one of default like blank. And there is another variable which is the null, and you can also set that to be true. The null will do the same. It will make sure that the object or the certain field can be null. Now let's have a look at something else before we migrate. And that's going to be this stir function. The stir function is two double underscores, stir and then double underscores, and it will receive the self. The self is basically your product. What this stands for is that you format how it looks in the admin panel a little bit, how your data is presented in the admin panel. That's what this stir function is basically for. Usually you have it at all of your models because you want your data plotted out nice and neat. Now let's try and migrate our database. I clear the console, Python, manage.py, make migrations, and our migrations with the 002 ID got created, and Python, manage.py, migrate. And we are able to migrate as well. Now if I run the server and let's visit the admin panel, we should be able to see it. Oh wait, actually we won't be able to see it, because we have to register it. So here in the admin.py, import your product detail and admin.site.register product detail. Now we should be able to see it. And if you go to the admin panel, you are able to go ahead and create new product details. I will create a new one just so we can test around with it. As you see at the product, you are able to choose to which product you are choosing this detail to. For example, it will be to the product object 1. This will be Levi's beds, warranty period of 6 months, and no additional info. And let's save it. Let's actually add another for the other one as well. Product object 2, info here, just some dummy data. Save. Now we'll be working on views that will enable us to actually show these details, because these are linked up to the products now. So come on to your views. The reason this is going to be a little more tricky is because now we have to get a certain model based on another model's ID. But the fact that they are linked together helps out a lot. So def product detail is what I call this view. It will receive the request just like any other view would, and it will also receive a primary key. Now the thing is that this primary key going to be the product's ID, and we have to somehow get this object through the product's ID. The way we are going to do that is by getting the product underscore detail and setting it equal to the get object or 404. The model is going to be linked to is going to be the product detail, which I have yet to import. So product detail needs to be imported from our models, copy it and paste it over here. This is the model that we are looking for. We actually have to look for the property in this check. I'm looking for the product underscore ID, because as we know, the product does have an ID, but so it's linked to the actual model, we have to put the name of the model over here. The product ID needs to be equal to the primary key that was received through as a parameter. Now, as for the detail, all we have to do, convert it into JSON format, which we've done before up above, so I won't be explaining it too much. We are basically just referring to names and then the current fields that the product detail has, and then returning it in a JSON response, product detail JSON. That's all we are doing. Move on to our URLs to make this actually reachable. Create a new path, and this new path will be available from the products / and simply put in here the dynamic URL for the ID as here, like the primary key, and then / and it will be called details, and then make sure to put a / at the end after this, and we'll call the views and then product detail. We are referring to that method. Give it a simple name like product-detail, and now this should be set up and working. If you visit products/2 and then put /details after it, press pretty print, and the actual detail gets back here, like the 12-month warranty, the info here, the CEO, all this stuff. So this is actually pretty good, because now we've shown the details, or actually a model that's linked to another model, and we are still able to get its data to the full extent. In the next one, we'll be creating some more models to show you the last two type of links that you have, like the foreign key and the many-to-many relationship, and then we'll move on to slugs and UUID-s. So to showcase to you the other type of links that we have in models above the product, it's important that you do it above the product in our models.py. We create two other models. One is going to be the category. It's going to inherit from the models.model class, just as any other does. It's going to have a name like models.carfield. Max length is going to be 50. It's going to have a description, text field, and I'm going to put a format string over here, so it's represented as self.name in the UI. We'll create another one. This will be called tag. It will inherit the same way, and it will have a name and a format string. That's all it's going to have. Now the logic behind this is that there can be many tags, and one product can have multiple tags, while one tag can be at multiple products. That's going to be our many-to-many relation. The other one is the category, that one product can be only having one category, but one category can be set to multiple products. That's going to be our basic foreign key. So for example, below this stock, let's create a category, and this category will be set to models.foreign key, because as I said, this is the one-to-many relationship. the category model will be assigned to this one. And it also needs the onDelete method, which will be models.cascade. That's what people usually use. And its related name is going to be the products. Now, just to go through the logic once again, one product can only be assigned one category, but the same category can be assigned to multiple products. That's what the foreign key does. Below the foreign key, I create the tags. The tags is going to be a models.many-to-many field. It will be the tag model, and it will simply have a related name. It will be the products yet again. Just so to give him a related name, we won't be using it, I just gave it. To go through the logic of the tags yet again is that one product can have multiple tags, while those same tags can be applied to multiple products. Now we can migrate our database and see what happens. Python manage.py make migrations, and we run off into an error. To handle that error, I will set null to be true in the category, and I will also set the null to be true over here at the tags, and I will also set blank to be true, and make sure to set blank here at the category as well. This will enable us to migrate without having to worry about the data. So make migrations now, and we should be able to migrate. This is the second way that we were able to make the migrations work. Null has no effect on many-to-many fields. That's something that we can omit then, but it doesn't really matter. And I can now migrate, apply all migrations. I can clear the console and run the server. Let's visit the admin page now. In the admin page, we won't be able to see this because yet again, I forgot to include these. So let's go to the admin and let's actually include these. The category and the tags will be imported, and the category and the tag will need to be registered. Now, if you visit the admin panel, you will be able to see that you can add multiple tags. Let me add another tag like featured and save it, or like bestseller and save it. And also come to the categories and add some new categories like furniture. Now, since we set null to be equal to true, I will have to come to the products and set them here, like the category will be furniture here and it will be the bestseller. I save it. I will also go to the product object 1 or the product object 2 and I can set the furniture to be the category over here as well, and this will be the featured one. I can save it now, and this is how you link up data in the admin panel. To represent this data at our product, for example, I mean these two, the foreign key and the many-to-many field, we can do two ways. For example, I can create tags and it will be equal to the list and the product dot tags dot values, since it's an iterable object, and I can give here the name. Additionally, I believe I can add the ID as well, but the name will be enough. And as for the category, I can give it like this, category. Since it's not iterable, I won't be able to use the list. I will specify an ID here, and it will be the product.category.id. I can also reach its name by the product, and I can also reach its description, which will be the product.category.description. With these two changes implied, if I come back and visit products/1, for example, I will be able to see the tags. It's an array of objects. As you can see, the list represented it like this. And then there is the category, which is exactly how we defined it. So these are two ways you can reach the data that you've given as a foreign key. Now let's have a look at slugs. What are slugs? Slugs are basically human readable format type of URLs, where instead of saying /products/ and then an integer, I instead say that there is this built-in slug, which will be called slug. And it can be like, for example, bad, or I don't know, X, or whatever you have in the URLs, and it will, for example, redirect you to the certain ID or just show a different type of data. And this time I will be redirecting. I will give a name in the meanwhile, which will be product redirect slug. We won't be implying the viewing here yet because we have to create some extra fields in our models. It's going to be rather simple. Below the created it, I click for the product, I create a slug, will be the models.slug field. We have to put unique to be true because we are going to use it as a URL. I will also set blank to be true over here, so I am able to migrate. And then jump back to our views now. The views are going to be rather simple. I will create this def product redirect by slug, and we'll get the product by their slug. It's the same as if I was to get it by their primary key, but instead now I'm getting it by their slug. And then what I'm going to do is import at the top a redirect, get objector 404, put a comma and import the redirect, and I will be redirecting the user to a certain URL. I will return the redirect function where I redirect to the product, where the primary key is equal to the product.primarykey.pk, like this. Now, the reason this still won't be working is because we are yet to create these, and I want the slugs to be auto-generated. For that we have to come back and override the built-in method in our products. And this will be the save method that we are overwriting, def save. If you put an enter on this, you'll be able to see a bunch of data got pre-populated, and I won't be touching it for now. Let's leave it like this. We return the super.save, which is the basic saving method. You won't need to touch this. In fact, always leave it here. But if not self.slug, meaning we don't have a slug available yet, then we are going to create one. Self.slug will be equal to the self, which is the object, obviously, that we are reaching out to. Self.name.lower, because I want it to be lowercase, and I'm also going to replace every space in here that we might have with a dash, because the URLs won't accept spaces. With this we have a simple slug generation now, and we should be able to migrate. I am getting an error in the console that missing one required positional argument in the views, and that's correct because in the views I have to redirect by slug. Where is it? Or in the URLs, it was in the URLs. So in here, views, product, redirect by slug. Now we shouldn't be having this problem, so I can stop the development server and see if we can migrate. We can in fact migrate because I've set blank to be true, and I can push the migrate now, and we are getting a bunch of errors. So instead of dealing with the errors, creating new everything, I will delete the database and move on to the UUID because it's going to be very similar to the slug. And then I have a copy-pastable sort of comments that you'll be able to find in the repo where you copy-paste it and it will auto-populate you some data. So let's just stop this whole thing for now, clear it. And let's move back to the models. Let's add the UUID that I will also be wanting to show you. For that, at the top, import UUID. The UUID is just basically a random ID that's generated, a unique identifier. And all this is going to do is below the slug, UUID will be set to models.UUID field. You have to pass in the default as the UUID that we've imported, like over here, and then dot, and put in the UUID 4. This is the length of the UUID that will get generated. I don't want it to be editable, I want it to be always unique, and for that I will also be setting the unique field to be true. While we're at it, I will put a string over here so it's formatted more nicely. Now that we have this large models file, we can move on to the views, and when creating the UUID field, it's just basically the same as the slug with a different name, and instead of passing in the slug and searching for it, we search for the UUID. That's all about it. Since I've explained the slug, I don't need explanation for the UUID. Now come back to the URLs, and instead of doing the slug way, we are going to do the other way as well. Yet again, just change everywhere the slug to be the UUID. And make sure to have the correct method set up. With this, I will go on to our admin panel and change things up a little bit because we won't be showing these fields by default. So instead, we have this new class. It will be called product admin and it will inherit from the admin.modeladmin. It's important that it inherits from the admin.modeladmin and not the models.model. In the list display, I can specify which fields do I want to display. In the search fields, there will be a search field in Django where you can filter by these, and also the list filter, I will be able to sort and list by the category and the created at date. That's all this does over here, and I have to also register it along with the product, so the product admin will get registered along here with the product. I hope it's understandable and it's not too fast-paced for you. We are basically just yet again overriding a little bit of styling in our admin panel. And now I can delete our whole database. The way I'm going to do it is select everything except the init files. In the PyCache folder inside the migrations as well, select everything except the init file and then just delete them. Also delete your db.sqlite, and now we should be able to migrate if no other errors occur. Make the migrations. We have some warnings, but we've already had those, so it's not a problem. And then Python managed PI migrate. And we don't have any problems with the migrations either. That's great news. Now all we have to do is create a super user, so I leave that to you. Once I've created the super user, now I have to fill up some data. How am I going to do that? I haven't showed you the way you can do that from the shell. There is an interactive shell for Django which you can access through the Python managed PI shell. In here, you are able to access your database from the shell, and you are able to copy paste some data that I will be providing you to create your database instead of creating it from the admin panel. So I paste these in. Make sure to grab this from our repo. I ran into some errors while pasting the code, and make sure I will be providing you the proper source code, but make sure to, in the models, remove the blank, true and the null from the tags. So the null is removed from over here. The null can stay at the category and the blank can stay at the category as well. Just make sure to remove the null from your tags. And now if you go on and paste it into the shell, it should be working. And now if you have a look over here, you'll be able to see in the admin panel that a bunch of furniture got created. I actually doubled the data because I changed the script. But if you visit the products, you should be able to see that you have the data generated over here. You go to product/1, there you go. You go to product/1/details, and everything is working exactly as it was supposed to work. Open up another admin panel though, because we haven't tried the slug routing yet. Go to the products, go to the office chair, for example, and then the slug for this one is going to be office/chair. So if at products, you search for office/chair, you should be able to get redirected to the second one. So with this, the slug generation and the slug redirects also work. We've made everything work in this little Django project, and I've introduced you to a lot of data handling and models. I hope it was understandable and you enjoyed it. If you did, consider giving us a like, maybe even subscribe. And other than that, I hope to see you in the next one. If you have any questions, make sure to comment it down below. Happy coding and God bless.